If you're well into your 30s or 40s, chances are you've moved into the why does everything hurt phase of your life. You get up in the morning and your body is kind of like stiff and tight for no reason. Go down a flight of stairs, your knees are talking to you. Your back decides to throw a party, and pain is the uninvited guest. You've lost a step, or two, or three, or maybe even four. And if you're like me, you're wondering when you went from feeling like a spry young adult to understanding why grandpa makes those old person noises when he goes to sit down in his chair. So the question is, do you embrace the old fart lifestyle? Do you opt out of the pickup game that you're invited to? And do you become the sideline expert during the kids' practice when you could be on the field mixing it up with them? The answer is a resounding no. Do not go gently into the night. Don't embrace the geriatric shuffle. I'm going to show you how you can get your bounce back and revive your athletic body. Back in my school days, I played a lot of sports. I'm sure some of you were like this. You were always on a team, going to practice or games, and when you weren't doing that, you were getting together with the kids in the neighborhood for some impromptu horseplay, pickup games, running around in the street, things like that. It was the golden age of impromptu exercise. We were just always out there mixing it up and being active. But then life clocked in. Getting into the workforce cut free time to a minimum. Now, I was lucky because I worked at a gym, so I didn't have much of an excuse for skipping a workout. But there was a big shift in my training. I went from running around and playing a lot of sports to basically getting a PhD in the bench press, just focusing exclusively on strength training and kind of ignoring all the other fast, dynamic athletic movements that we grew up doing. Now, this wasn't without its perks. I got strong, I got stable, I got bigger muscles. And I even did some natural bodybuilding competitions. With this, my confidence grew as well. I liked how I looked, I liked how my clothes fit, I liked how I felt when I walked into a room. And it's good to experience this type of physical confidence. I think it's something that everybody should feel at one time. To a certain extent, of course. There can be too much of a good thing. The big problem was that I was losing my athletic abilities. I wasn't making time to do things that were fast, agile, dynamic, all the things that I used to love when I was growing up. Who needs it when you can flex your way through the door? I just took it for granted that I would always have those abilities. But whatever we don't practice starts to diminish over time. So after a few years, I decided it was time to hang up the old posing trunks and get back to being a more well-rounded athlete and well-rounded human. I decided to kick off this new chapter with some hill sprints. Now, I live just outside of Boston, so there's plenty of hills to be had. And on the first one, I was about halfway up, planted my right foot, and bang. I felt like I got shot in the calf. Luckily, I didn't get shot, but I did strain it, and it hurt like hell. I had to limp home. Workout over. No permanent damage, but I was limping for a few days, and it took about 2 weeks to fully recover. As I was letting my calf recover, I decided to get back into some martial arts training. So why not try a few rounds of shadow boxing and work on the heavy bag? It felt like I was moving through molasses. I was slow, I felt uncoordinated, and when I hit the bag, it felt like I was doing a drum solo with my bones. I couldn't believe it. I used to be lightning fast, but now every time I went to throw a hook, it felt like my obliques were tearing. Now, you'd think I'd learned my lesson, but not exactly. The same scenario kept playing out for almost a year. My calf would feel better, I'd go to try to run some sprints, and boom, it would strain again. Give it 2 weeks, let it recover, same situation. It wasn't even just one side. It would alternate from right calf to left calf and then back again. Even in martial arts training, I was feeling like I was getting gassed really fast. I wasn't as coordinated or fast as I used to be. After a few months of this happening, it became really disheartening. At 37, I figured I had at least a couple decades left of pretty good athletic performance. I thought I would age like a fine wine, but I was really just turning into rancid grape juice. So finally, after quite a bit of pain, I decided to take my foot off the gas, take a step back, and evaluate the situation to see if I could figure out what was going on. I had this epiphany. My body was playing a trade-off game. I couldn't be both muscle mountain and bouncy trampoline simultaneously. There's a trade-off between strength and tissue elasticity. You can be pretty good at both, or you can maximize one, but what you can't do is maximize both simultaneously. It's like a game of choose your own superpower, and it makes a lot of sense if you look at sports. Think of the athletes who are the fastest, the jumpiest and the bounciest. Soccer players, basketball players, they're great at their sport. They're not going to have a world-class deadlift or mountains of muscle, at least not compared to somebody like a bodybuilder or a powerlifter. They're great at developing force slowly, but you put them in a game of volleyball and they look like a fish out of water. There's just two very different capabilities happening there. We can't alter our genes yet, but our body will adapt to whatever stimulus we give it. And for years, I've been giving it a strength stimulus. I've been trying to build muscle and produce force slowly. But when I suddenly asked it to switch gears into zoom mode, it hit the emergency brake, and I got injured. I'd been training for one adaptation and then tried to maximize a totally different one. My tissues just weren't ready for the high impact. But I knew that if I changed my body once, I could do it again. I could take off the winter tires and put the high performance ones back on. So I made it my mission to remold my body back into an athletic machine. To start, I had to scale my training way back. Essentially, my bigger muscles were still powerful. The quads, glutes, hamstrings, and pecs were doing a pretty good job. But it was the smaller stabilizing muscles that weren't ready for the high impact. Essentially, it was like having a car with a giant engine and really shitty shocks and struts. My strategy was to start with really low intensity drills and then slowly and surely ramp up the intensity as the weeks and months went by. I started to train my foot, calf, and ankle complex with a movement that I called the boxer's bounce. It's just a small, low amplitude 2-foot bounce that's even less impact than jump roping. It's really the lowest impact movement this side of napping, but it was the movement that was necessary for rebuilding that tissue tolerance. With my martial arts training, I had to essentially erase my memory and forget what I used to be capable of doing so I could focus on what I was capable of doing now, which was really low-intensity shadow boxing. But I worked it, put in the rounds, put in thousands and thousands of reps, and slowly but surely it started coming back. On top of these prescriptions, in the morning I would do a 10-minute stretching routine to regain some lost mobility. Lo and behold, the bounce-o-meter started ticking up slowly but surely. I was able to tolerate a little bit more speed and a little bit more intensity. It stopped feeling like my body was a bag of marbles that I had thrown in the dryer. I progressed from the boxer's bounce to jump roping. A few weeks later, started implementing a few simple skips and track drills, then some low-intensity running, and finally, after several months of training, I got back to high-speed sprinting. I also increased the intensity of my martial arts training. Week after week, I would add some more speed, some more velocity, till I started to feel like my old self again, which incidentally was my younger self. Pretty fast, able to sustain multiple rounds without getting gassed, and I could wail on the heavy bag without it wailing back on me. That was a quick summary, but the comeback story took quite a bit of time and patience, and there were setbacks along the way. Every few weeks, I'd have like a minor tweak or a little strain that would set me back. But persistence was key. Every time I pushed a little too far, I just scaled it back and kept going. Now, if you'd like to make your own comeback story, but you've got a few pounds to shed first, check out my video on goal setting for weight loss. It's like a GPS that guides you through all the necessary steps to get back to your healthy, athletic body weight. Link in the description. Over about 9 months, I was able to regain my athletic ability. That was about 3 years ago, and I've sustained it ever since. Along the way, I learned a few important lessons, and here are my big 3 takeaways from this process. Lesson 1, warm-ups are key. When you're 22 years old, warm-ups are kind of like the advertisements before the YouTube video, totally skippable. But as you approach 40, they become more of the main attraction. So now I'm very diligent with my warm-ups. I take a good 15 minutes to get my body temperature up and gradually increase the intensity so I can do all the fast, bouncy, high-intensity things that I really love. Takeaway number 2, consistency is the real MVP. Our bodies just feel better with some regular action and movement. We should be doing something every single day. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be high intensity all the time. Some days will be like that. Other days will be a walk in the park. Could be literally and figuratively. Taking a brisk walk, some stretching, things that are going to get your heart moving and move your joints through a full range of motion. If you do this on a consistent basis, you're going to feel way better. Takeaway number 3, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. It's more than just gym lore. This is the reversibility principle in exercise science. Any skill or adaptation that isn't practiced regularly will diminish over time. I worked hard to get my bounce back, and I'm glad that I did it when I did, because the longer I waited, the tougher it would be to get back. So I made this vow to myself. Never stop playing. If I want to feel free in my body for the rest of my life, I have to put in the work of running, jumping, rolling, and horsing around, which really isn't that bad when you think about it. There are much worse things that we have to do as adults, like laundry and taxes. If you're ready to channel your inner athlete, a good place to start is by taking the Peak Performance Quiz. It's like a personality test for your fitness. The link is cozy down there in the description. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you're into that kind of thing. Your clicks keep this train a rolling. Now, get out there and give gravity a run for its money.